Built for $7.5 million in Belfast, Ireland, Titanic was the most luxurious ocean liner of its kind.
It was finished in Belfast, and then they did the sea trials there, and then they sailed to Southampton with it for the delivery trip, as they call it.
Titanic was more than 888 feet long, 170 feet high, and weighed 46,000 tons. It had a heated swimming pool, a gym, 2 libraries, 2 barbershops, and 4 elevators.
It was the most luxurious ship. Even the third class was way better than the third class on a lot of ships. My grandfather helped to build the ship in Belfast, Ireland. He was one of thousands of people who would have worked on the ship, and he was a machinist, and he helped to build one of the engines.
Mary Ann Whitley is the author of Ohio Tales of the Titanic.
There were 55 people on board who were traveling to Ohio.
Whitley's book details the 55 Ohioans who were on the ill-fated journey from England to New York.
And it was just about half and half. 28 died and 27 survived.
Among the survivors, Benora Ayub from the country of Lebanon.
She was only 12 years old.
Ayub was traveling with relatives.
John Thomas, one of them, he had gone back to Lebanon, where he was from, to visit his family, and he was returning back to the United States after that trip, along with his son. I mean, he had actually lived in Columbus for about 12 years, and he had become a rather successful businessman. And his wife had just given birth to another child just a few weeks before he was preparing to go back to Columbus.
Jessie Trout was returning from her native Scotland.
So Jessie was 26 years old. She had emigrated from Scotland and was living in Columbus, where her parents were also living. After the Titanic disaster, she decided to join her parents in Minnesota, where they had moved to, and there she met her second husband, Harvey Bortner, and she died really in a tragic car accident in 1930 when the family car slid on an icy road and went into a ditch, and she panicked and jumped from the car, and the car turned over and landed on top of her, and it killed her instantly.
A ticket on Titanic wasn't cheap. A first-class ticket would have cost about $150 then, or $2,400 in today's money. A parlor suite would set you back $69,000 in today's dollars, and a third-class ticket would cost just under $500.
In first class, 63% of the people survived, but in third class, only 25%.
On the night the ship hit the iceberg, passengers were asleep.
They had gone up to the boat deck after the collision to find out what was going on, and they were told there wasn't any danger and to go back to their cabins, which they did. Some of them fell asleep again. Until the rooms filled with water. The Lebanese passengers found there was water in their cabins, so they went back up on deck, you know, and also by that time the stewards were telling passengers to get on life belts and go up on deck. The watertight doors were built to a certain height, and they did not anticipate anything that could happen that could cause the water to get above the watertight doors. But it did. Women and children were offered lifeboats first, but there were not enough for everyone. And as far as the Columbus-bound passengers who survived, there was a fair amount of luck involved. Survivors waited 4 hours before the ship Carpathia would rescue them. Anyone who was in the water and could not get onto a lifeboat, couldn't swim to a lifeboat or whatever, even if they had life belts on, you know, they're not going to survive that. That water was just above freezing. Once on land, women were now widows, the men widowers. In the years that followed, few spoke of the tragedy. Many of them did have a hard time dealing with the aftermath of the sinking. Some of them had nightmares, and one survivor, he would never go to a baseball game because the roar of the crowd reminded him of the screams of the people in the water struggling to survive. More than a century has passed since the practically unsinkable sank. 1,500 lives were lost. 713 people survived. Of the 16 people headed to Cleveland and Northeast Ohio, 7 were saved. 12 people on board were headed to Akron, but only 9 made it off the ship. 16 people were headed to the Youngstown area, but only 9 survived. 7 were headed to the Toledo area. None of those passengers survived. Of the 7 headed to Columbus, 3 made it home. The White Star Line did give people some aid. Also, various agencies like the Red Cross, they were there, Salvation Army, you know, was helping the survivors as soon as they got off the Carpathia, especially those who didn't have any relatives there meeting them. They were taken to hotels and they were given clothing, food, and some money, and, you know, helped them to make travel arrangements to get to their final destination.
Historians say we can draw inspiration from those who survived and ask ourselves,
and then we can also, I think, take inspiration from the lives of these survivors, who some of whom were left with virtually nothing, and yet they went on, they kept on, and managed to create new lives, and some of them even thrived, succeeded, and in spite of surviving this terrible and, you know, emotionally traumatic disaster. I think that we connect with the stories of the people because as we read about them or learn about them and how they behaved, that sort of makes us evaluate how would we act in that kind of a situation. Would we be courageous? Would we help others, step up and help other people? Or would we be more cowardly?
Kevin Landers, 10 TV News.